Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry. It's 6 o'clock. Coming up tonight, we all talk, don't we, about the crisis in the Channel when it comes to people getting on these boats illegally. What, though, is the solution? That is the million-dollar question. Lord Heseltine, he thinks he might have the answer. It's twofold. One, build a wall all around Europe. And two, spend more UK foreign aid money on various countries to stop people wanting to leave there in the first place. It's an idea, but you tell me, is it a good one or not? And Rishi Sunak speaking out, he says he wants to cap the number of people that can do so-called Mickey Mouse degrees. I would say, why is there such a thing as a so-called Mickey Mouse degree in the first place? Education needs reform in this country, if you ask me. And how many children have you got? Have you been affected by the two-child benefit cap? If so, do you agree with it or not? That is the million-dollar question on my mind tonight. And are you a gambler? Do you not mind a little bit of a flutter here and there? Do you think gambling companies, though, should be allowed to advertise their wares when it comes to things like football matches or not? And also, if I've got time, I want to squeeze another extra in that I saw tonight. A counsellor, he's a religious man, he tweeted out that basically Pride, you know, the gay celebration, it's a sin and not a virtue. He's lost his whip, he's been cancelled in various places. Are religious views incompatible with public life or not? We've got it all to come with Alex Dean and Peter Hitchens. But before we do that, let's get ourselves up to speed, shall we, with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister wants to put an end to universities taking advantage of people with low-quality courses. The government plans to impose limits on courses that have high dropout rates or a low proportion of graduates getting a professional job. Rishi Sunak says the key message is you don't have to go to university to succeed in life. Well, speaking at a school in London earlier, Mr Sunak said the new measures will benefit taxpayers.
Many people, university is the right answer and it does brilliantly, but actually there are a range of people who are being let down by the current system. They're being taken advantage of with low quality courses that don't lead to a job that makes it worth it, leaves them financially worse off. That's what we're clamping down on today, but at the same time making sure that young people have a range of fantastic alternative opportunities, whether that be apprentices or higher technical qualifications, for example. So the key message is, look, you don't have to go to university to succeed in life. There are a range of fantastic options, and that's what we're delivering.
The government is defending its use of barges to house migrants, insisting it's a cheaper option to hotels. That's as accommodation barge is set to house 500 asylum seekers. It left Falmouth in Cornwall this morning and it's now on its way to Portland in Dorset. The government is currently locked in a tussle with the House of Lords over its illegal immigration bill. Opening today's Commons debate, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said the bill must be allowed to become law without it being weakened.
We believe that inaction is not an option, that we must stop the boats, and that this bill is a key part of our plan to do just that. The message and the means must be absolutely clear and unambiguous. If you come to the UK illegally, you won't be able to stay here. Instead, you'll be detained and returned to your home country or removed to a safe third country. There is simply no point in passing legislation that does not deliver a credible deterrent and provides the means to back it up.
A new drug has been hailed as a turning point for Alzheimer's. Donanemab has been found to slow clinical decline by up to 35%, meaning that people with the disease could still go about performing day-to-day tasks. Well, Alzheimer's Research UK says we're entering a new era where the disease could become treatable. The drug is being assessed to see if it can be used in the NHS. Hostile states are infiltrating the UK to engage in illegal activities via organised crime gangs. The head of the National Crime Agency warns of emerging links between serious and organised crime and hostile states such as Russia and North Korea. Speaking in Westminster, the NCA's Director General said that foreign powers are starting to use crime gangs as proxies to carry out tasks on British territory. A watchdog has welcomed new immigration rules for EU citizens, but says it remains concerned about how they will work. IMA has praised the Home Office's decision to ensure EU citizens will not lose the right to live in the UK. More than 2.5 million EU citizens will have their pre-settled status automatically extended for 2 years if they do not make further application for settled status. But the watchdog argues the Home Office did not publish enough detail on how the plans will be implemented. Sir Elton John has given evidence at Kevin Spacey's sex offences trial. He was called as a defence witness along with his husband David Furnish. Both attended via video link from Monaco. 4 men have accused Mr Spacey of sexual assault and indecent assault. He denies all charges. The Foreign Office has issued an extreme heat warning as southern Europe braces for record-breaking temperatures. British holidaymakers have been cancelling or changing their trips abroad ahead of the school holidays next week. Meanwhile, China has recorded its hottest ever temperature at 52.2 degrees in Sanbao. That's a remote town in the country's northwest, causing fear of drought. Well, weather experts say the warming climate is making extreme weather conditions the new normal. And the first swan census of the King's Reign is underway, with the swan marker and his team taken to the Thames. The swan hopping, it's an annual survey of the bird's population. That's when the King's feathered friends are counted and have their health checked. Well, the tradition dates back to the 12th century. That's when ownership of mute swans was claimed by the Crown to ensure a ready supply for feasts. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now, though, back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Rory. I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight, alongside with PR consultant Alex Dean and the columnist for the Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens. Good evening, gents.
Good evening to you.
You know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three here. It is very much about you guys at home. Get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com, as usual, is the email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Lots coming your way tonight. Dave, you're not messing around. Straight in there with your opinion tonight. We're asking about child benefit, whether or not it should be limited to 2 children. Dave says, Michelle, all child benefits should be scrapped. It's a lifestyle choice and it should not be subsidised by the taxpayer. He says he'd go even further and charge the cost of childbirth to the parents as well. Goodness gracious me, Dave, get yourself off that fence. I imagine your bottom is a little bit uncomfortable with your position there. What do you make to everyone at home? Do you agree with Dave or not? Do you reckon child benefit should even be a thing in this country or not? And if so, should it be capped, though, to 2 children? We'll have that a little bit later on in the programme. But first, we always talk, don't we, about the situation in the Channel when it comes to people getting on those dinghies. What, though, is the answer? How do we stop it? No one seems to know, quite frankly, or if they do know, they don't have the chops to implement it, I would suggest. But anyway, a suggestion has now come out from Lord Heseltine. He says that Britain should front what he calls a new Marshall Plan. It's 2 parts, he has to say. One part would be essentially building a wall around Europe, and the other part to it would be more around the amount of foreign aid that we send to countries to try and stop people from wanting to leave there in the first place. Alex, I'll start with you on this. Your thoughts?
Lord Heseltine's always had an eye for the headline, and sometimes he's got an eye for the symbolic. He certainly did when he was in government. Notion that catches public attention. I've agreed with almost nothing he said in recent times around Brexit and so forth, but that's not to mean he can't have a point here. And for me, the point I extract from it that has real benefit is already being said by our government, but he's put it more forcefully and in a different way, that there's no point waiting for people to arrive in a dinghy before you deliver assistance, when the much more effective and the much more productive way, if you are going to help people with legitimate asylum claims and refugee claims, is to help them in their home countries. Because all of the organisations that look at the most pro-migrant organisations tell us that more than half of those with eligible claims are still in their countries of origin. If we can help them there, it helps their country get itself back together, it helps the individual and ensures they don't come here in the first place. So actually, I think it's a win-win-win.
Do you agree with that? Win-win-win, Peter?
Yes, I do. The problem with it is that in the countries involved, you often have very poor government, and it's going to be very difficult if you do introduce such a Marshall Plan to ensure that the money is spent as it should be. And that is always the difficulty with any kind of foreign aid. In principle, we're all in favour of it, of spending money to help poor countries, because after all, it is one of the reasons for this migrant crisis, which the Western world now has, and it is beyond doubt one of the biggest crises we ever faced, is that people are totally unwilling to stay in the countries where they live, which are badly governed and poor, and often needlessly poor and badly governed and heavily corrupt as well. If we could sort that out, great, but I have to say that it would need an awful lot of intervention in those parts of the world, which
yes.
I'm not sure their governments would be prepared to take, especially given the modern habit of the Chinese government of going around offering no-strings money to such governments, which they can have without any kind of control at all. It's a wonderful, broad idea, but as in so many other things, the implementation might prove a lot more difficult.
You said everyone in principle agrees with the concepts of foreign aid. I bet there's some people watching this at home
well,
shouting.
If they don't, they should, because it's crazy to let major problems of hunger or collapsing economy fester in countries far away, because it will undoubtedly affect us in the end if we don't do it. It's simple common sense that you prevent that from happening if you can.
Well, there you go. That told you if you are one of those people that don't agree in foreign aid, you was about to come back in.
Just to say, Peter's point about corruption is well made, and that's why there's a long-standing cliche that our aid programme is taking money, broadly speaking, because it's taxpayer-funded, taking money from poor people in rich countries and giving it to rich people in poor countries, right? There is some truth to that. I agree with the point about the need to ensure that it's spent properly on the ground. And there are a couple of basic things I would do first. One would be not to have any aid going to a nation with a space programme. I think that's a basic example of where we're misspending our aid allocation. The second is to recognise openly what the government is doing in spending money on asylum seekers and would-be refugees in this country and housing them as part of our aid budget. It's happening now, but because it feels underhand, it's not talked about very much. I actually would say to the countries in question, you are going to receive less because your nationals have come here of their own free will, paying people smugglers along the way, and we are now having to house them whilst their claim is processed. The problem with the length of time it takes to process the claim, that's down to us, that's our fault. But the people choosing to come and paying people smugglers along the way, you can help with that. And if you want to make sure more aid comes to your country, you should stop your nationals coming in the first place.
Yeah, I've got to say I disagree with the pair of you, by the way, that I don't actually think that it is sensible to send more and more money to some of these countries, because a lot of these countries, they are, they're in the situation that they're in often because of internal civil war conflicts, and I don't see how just truckloads more foreign money into those places will make things better. I would argue, actually, that will make things worse.
I agree with you. Sending truckloads without any kind of supervision of how it's spent is completely useless.
Agreed.
And there's no point in it. It has to be done very skillfully and very carefully. And if the money is repeatedly abused, then it has to stop.
What about this wall then? This wall, because the money is one part.
Just stuff. Where are you going to build it? Who's going to build it? It's a sort of Donald Trump thing, isn't it? It's really peculiar. We know, do we not, that the European Union has paid Turkey an awful lot of money to turn its country into a sort of wall, and there used to be an arrangement until David Cameron overthrew him, that Colonel Gaddafi would prevent an awful lot of migration across the Mediterranean, which is basically us paying these countries to keep their coasts from being used by people smugglers.
Well,
that's as near as you can get to a wall.
I can only assume that Lord Heseltine was speaking metaphorically when he spoke of a wall. You can't wall up Lampedusa. You can't wall up Sicily. You can't wall up the enormous coastline in Greece that has been seeing boats come so much. So the point is that he's advocate. It's very interesting. People criticise Britain and say that we've got a little Englander attitude when we say that if someone comes here through these routes, unlawful routes, then they should have no legitimate right to be here. They say we're being bigoted or unfair, or we're violating people's human rights. When you put it on the European level and say you couldn't come to the whole of Europe without coming legitimately and properly, they say that's wonderful, oh super, ode to joy.
Well, I'm going to throw it to you guys at home because I want to talk to you about Eunice as well. But on that migrant situation, what do you think about two-pronged approach, more money and a wall. Some of you, I suspect, will be cheering that. But what about the practicalities of it? Would it actually happen? Could it actually happen? And if you don't agree with that plan, you tell me what your solution would be to what is going on in the Channel. I want to talk briefly before my break, if I can, about education, because Rishi Sunak, he's been speaking out today, wants to cap the number of students that can be accepted onto, quote, per quality university degrees. He basically, what he's talking about is the amount of people that go into high quality employment, looking at the dropout rates and all the rest of it. What do you make to his thoughts today? Well,
I think there's an election coming up, and so people are starting to say things which are crowd pleasing. But the truth is that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party together engaged in what I regard as a grave mistake of university expansion in the 1990s. That they hugely diminished the quality of university education, and they saddled an awful lot of people with debts because they persuaded them that it would benefit them to undergo this university education. And in many cases, it's of no use to them at all, or very little use. And I think there was a mistake. And sooner or later, we have to recognise it was a mistake. And I think a lot of university places have to come to an end. A lot of universities have to close, and we have to go back to a much more selective, much smaller university sector, raising the school-leaving age to 21, which is basically what they did by expanding universities. That's what it was a mistake. And a lot of people would have been far better off in apprenticeships or other forms of training than they were at universities offering, I'm not saying Mickey Mouse degrees, but degrees which led nowhere.
I could not wait to get out of school, I can tell you. When I was 15, prematurely, I was not supposed to be.
Yeah, but if you're paying, if school is away from home and it's residential, and you're charmed into taking on a huge debt which you're told won't bother you later in life, then it's not the same, is it? That's what was done to people. They were cajoled into taking on enormous debts, which are now becoming harder and harder to repay.
Well,
I don't think it's done the country any good at all.
The expansion certainly happened in the time frame Peter talks about, and certainly as far as the Blair government was concerned, they embraced this explosion of attendance at university, not least because it acted as a mask on unemployment. It took another 3 years of people effectively paying to take themselves off the unemployment rolls, which suited them but often didn't suit the individuals concerned. But there is a contrary perspective, which is that most of these establishments weren't just born afresh on greenfield sites. They were something else. They provided a different kind of education before they were converted to university. And very often, that was a more productive establishment when it was in that former role than the one that it occupies now.
The polytechnics, which John Major brought to an end, were in many cases very good at what they did.
The trouble is, it's extremely difficult to reverse a university into a polytechnic, whilst it's very, very easy to take a polytechnic into a university.
But in a country which has had a series of governments who've done almost nothing but make mistakes, we do have to reach the point where we say that was a mistake, we have to rectify it, we have to go back on it, we have to put it back. Not necessarily the way it was before, but certainly we have to recognise that this was the wrong thing to do, we shouldn't have done it, and we have to reverse it.
Can I just make a different point, though, which is about the idea of the government imposing caps on these things? And I declare an interest because I worked in education policy long ago for the Conservative Party, but it seems to me that the government, broadly speaking, shouldn't really be in the business of controlling the number of people who go to universities really at all. And the reason that it is because the state, as Peter and I probably agree on, is wrongly funding some people to do it, and therefore it has a taxpayer interest in doing so. But individuals making the free choice to go somewhere and pay for the cost of it, that's something that intellectually I find quite difficult to say you can't. To say the state won't support you doing it, that's a completely reasonable thing. But I think most of these things I'd lift the cap on it. Outside of specific jobs where I would, again, have many more people going to university for, say, medicine, where the state imposes a false cap at the moment. There's a false cap on the number of people being trained to be doctors, but and the state pays for a lot of it. I would then oblige them to stay in the NHS for a certain number of years.
Think of poor people whose parents never went to university, who know nothing about it, who are faced with this choice of what university to go to, what to do, whether to go to university when they finish school. They know nothing of this. They can be sold almost anything.
That's true, but then many of them were falsely
terribly exploited by this.
I accept your premise that many people went not knowing what would happen after they'd gone and so forth. That has to be right. But on the other hand, there is something quite paternalist about saying to someone, you are not allowed to to take on the risk. You're an adult now. We'll let you serve in the military. We'll let you drive a car. We'll let you have a drink. But you can't make the decision to take on higher education. I mean, it's very difficult, I think, to defend that.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone said that, though, did they? No one said you can't take the decision. It should be...
No, it's not about
the government is going to put caps on it. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you should put caps. You put the caps on by having a fairly... You have to reconstruct the school examination system. The A-levels, which are a joke now, need to be completely reconstructed so that you can actually put people through a selective examination which enables universities to judge whether they want to take you. It should be guided then by how many people qualify to do a proper university course. A lot of people won't. For a lot of people, university is not where they need or want to be, and it's time we recognise
A lot of
this.
people will say it's great fun, though. I imagine a lot of people have had some fantastic student years at university. Are you one of them or not? And parental snobbery. I think a lot of parents out there, they're desperate for their kids to go to university so that they can tell their mates that their kid has gone to university. How do we undo all that, though, if indeed you think that we do? Your thoughts are on email gbviews@gbnews.com. Two-child policy when it comes to the child benefit limit in this country. Do you agree with it or not? Your thoughts?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Oh, hello. I wasn't expecting you back so soon. I was just reading emails to these two that compliments that had been received from my dear viewers. I was very lucky. I wasn't saying something else, something perhaps that might have been a little bit ruder than that. But
you
no,
would never do that.
You've never been rude as far as I know.
Anyway, thank you very much for your feedback on the panels tonight. Glenn says, Michelle, though, I can't believe you're saying Mickey Mouse degrees are not worth doing. I went to university for 3 years and I learned how to get extremely drunk. And yes, he says that he might have some debts, but thoughts it was a great experience there or thereabouts. Yeah, but you could have got drunk on a fraction of that, Dosh. That's my point. And you could have made some great friends along the way as well. Anyway, Alex Dean, the PR consultant, is alongside me, as is the columnist for the Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens. Now, let's talk, shall we? Two-child benefits cap. Do you have children, more than two? Do you have none at all and think perhaps that you shouldn't have to pay for anyone else's kids? Let's listen to Keir Starmer at the weekend, shall we?
If you have more than 2 children at the moment, you don't get benefits. Would that change under a Labour government?
We're not changing that policy.
You're not changing the two-child policy benefits, OK?
Right, yeah, well, there you go. So basically what he is alluding to there is the fact that the two-child benefits cap is here to stay. It basically, Alex, I'll come to you first. I am from a big family. I think big families are fantastic. I'm one of 6. But there is a debate that's been raging for a very long time, hence the fact that you do have this two-child cap now, as to where is the limit and should there be a limit on what the taxpayer helps to fund and contribute when it comes to the number of children that a family chooses to have. Where are you on it?
Well, before we went to the break, Peter was saying people are taking different positions now because we've got an election coming up. And I think this is a reflection of that in spades, because it's been the Labour Party's position for some years that they would repeal the cap. And their position now is dictated, interestingly and tellingly, by the growing belief that they will be in government, and part of being in government is having to try to balance the books. So the line from Rachel Reeves and everyone tucking in behind her is, we're not going to make an announcement without costing it, which is, you know, echoes very much actually post-97 the Blair approach of following the Tory party's budget for the first term in government. That is, they're trying to say to the electorate, we can be trusted on the economy because we're not going to change things that we're inheriting from the Tories. Interestingly enough, the cap has only actually been with us since 2013, and eagle-eyed viewers will remember that that was the coalition government that introduced it. So you're not really going to get outflanked by the Lib Dems either. Right? So the fear normally would be saying, if we drop our commitment to the cap, then we'll get outflanked on the left by the Lib Dems, and therefore Keir Starmer has made the rather cynical, if you're a lefty watching, and 48 Labour MPs rebelled against this some time ago. If you're a lefty watching, you think, my leader's been really cynical. He knows the left's not going to come up in the form of the Lib Dems, so he can get away with this. Yeah, and I mean, you say about them criticising it very recently. I mean, a couple of years ago, you mentioned as well Starmer. Look, we can have a look at that. He pledged there, as you say quite rightly, to pledge the cap. And as recently as well as last month, you got Jonathan Ashworth as well. He was calling the policy, I quote, an offensive nonsense. Angela Rayner as well as being less than complimentary about it too. Peter, where do you stand on it?
Well, it's just so expensive under current circumstances that it's just very difficult to discuss it broadly without having that in mind. That it would cost so much money to do, and it would cause all kinds of resentments too, I think, among those people who weren't getting it. I mean, my own yearning is, of course, to reinstate the institution of marriage and to support it. And I would love it if we had a welfare system that did that. But that would to achieve that would involve a huge social revolution in this country, returning to views which have by and large been pushed to the margin. So I can't really state any sort of general principle about it because it would be so futile. It is what basically is going on, as Alex says, is that the Labour Party is paring down its budget commitments before an election, as it has to do because it expects to win. That's all it's about. It has no other significance.
But what do you think? One of my viewers, one of the first comments I received into my show tonight was from one of my viewers, Dave, if my memory serves me correctly, where he was saying that children are essentially a lifestyle choice, and why he's saying should the taxpayer have to pay anything at all for people's kids? I heard that, but my position is different to Dave's, and it's a reflection of the conversation we're having about university. I believe that we should support a small group of people, not about their backgrounds, but about their abilities to go to university, because it's in the interest of the state to create and produce great minds. Not 50% of the country, but I'm not saying by any means I would be in that small group, but a small group of people who should be supported to go to university, a policy that got destroyed when we expanded university education the way we did. Equally, I think we need children. I don't have any children, but I believe in paying my taxes and supporting child policies, including paying for state education, another form of support for children that I don't have, because I believe in the future of our country. But there, again, there has to be a balance. Doesn't
doesn't mean we're going to pay as a country for you to have 10, 15 children and subsidise your own life in that way. So the state has to produce, I think, a number. The state has decided that number is 2, and if you think that number is wrong, then you can debate about it. But surely the position being taken by the naysayers and the Labour Party is no cap for as many kids as you want, because it really, as Peter says, it gets phenomenally expensive at that point.
It does, and what I found quite interesting is the difference in mindsets towards certain people when they're thinking about having children, because you'll have one group in society that are sitting there go, right, OK, I want to have a child, and they will really sit down and work out, right, can I afford this? What does it look like childcare-wise? Do I have to get a bigger property? Can I afford that extra bedroom? Whatever. And then that family might decide, actually, I literally cannot afford to, whether it's have a second child or maybe even have any children at all. Then you'll have, it feels and seems perhaps, that you have another side of society which actually they don't think at all about the financial implications of it, because their view would be, well, it's fine. The benefit system will just help me out. I'll get a council house when I have this child. I'll get you free childcare and all the rest of it.
This is true. Anybody who uses the welfare system irresponsibly destroys it for other people who want to use it responsibly, and that is one of the problems about it, that a sensible welfare system should be built to try and prevent that from happening, but that's not easy. But it is not the more you think about it, the more it doesn't seem to be a simple question. As I say, I would, however we did it, I would prefer this country to going back to having many, many more stable married families in which children were brought up. And I think that obviously if the tax and benefit system would at least stop not favouring that, as at the moment it makes it, in my view, it actually discriminates against it, then that would be a good thing. But I think an argument about how many children you could have benefit from at current rates is not even a realistic argument to have.
There's a lot of strong feelings coming through. So Mark says, if you want kids, then pay for them yourselves. He says, I did. But I bet you will have got family allowance there, surely, Mark. And Peter says child benefits should be abolished entirely. If you can't afford your children, don't rely on the state. Penelope, though, she says, I think child benefit is a good thing. It helps young families that are starting out in life and not always earning those high salaries. And you make a very good point. You say we all want and need babies because it will be them paying the taxes to support us as we get into our ripe old age. I agree with you on that one. Keep your thoughts, though, coming in, because I find that it really generates strong opinions, particularly, I think, from people that don't have children, that would essentially say, well, why do I have to pay for your kids then?
That's why it'd be so explosive to raise it.
Yeah, but then I would ask those...
That's why it would become so politically difficult to do, and why Keir Starmer is now pulling away from it.
And I would ask those people at home, if you are in that camp, you're allowed to be, all opinions valid and all that. So if you don't have all the children, who will take care of you then when you get into your old age, whether it's physically or via tax revenue? What's your answer to that conundrum? Another conundrum as well, perhaps, gambling. Do you think gambling should be allowed to be advertised in sport? Get this, apparently, when looking at some football games, apparently betting logos were popping up every 16 seconds. Is that a bit much or not?
Earlier on GB News Radio.
With me now is Nadia Essex, who is a dating coach. Nadia, thank you very much. I don't think I'll be getting too much traction on the old dating apps after people have just seen me scream like a baby on the telly. But anyway, so look, when it comes to this old spider's web sex stuff, I mean, hey, I suppose it's good news for people.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I feel like if you've had surgery and perhaps you've had problems with your prostate, or I think it's in, to do with prostate cancer, then what a great way to sort of get back out there and have something that's kind of made by nature help you get it on again.
I'm just going to explain a little bit about how it apparently works. So they did this study, so 6 men in their 50s, which I actually think is a really good age to do this study, because a lot of people, I think, associate prostate issues with men in their 80s or 90s, by which point, perhaps, the bed isn't rocking as much as it once used to anyway. But in your 50s, you're in your prime. So 6 men in their 50s had them attached to, these are spiders' webs, had them attached to the ends of a nerve that would have been severed during some kind of prostate surgery. And apparently... with 3 of the 6, I'll take those odds, 3 of the 6 said their sexual function returned to normal in just 12 weeks. The nerve grew back. So that is great.
Wow.
But Nadia, can I just ask you a bit about, you know, if anyone is out there potentially struggling in the impotency department at the moment, are there any tips, for want of a better phrase, as to how you can overcome this?
Well, I suppose you have to find out the two things of whether it's sort of a psychological issue or a medical issue. Sometimes it's your body just can't do that, and so therefore you do need medical advice. And then sometimes it's psychological. We all, know that, the stresses of the world, you've got so much stress on people's shoulders at the moment. It's stress inside the house, outside the house, climate change people are told to worry about. I mean, we're told that there's another pandemic around the corner and there's a killer virus out there. If people are having trouble performing and it's to do with the stress levels, the best advice is turn your phone off, turn the telly off, put some nice music on, cook a nice dinner, enjoy a glass of wine, and just let the romance flow.
I agreed with all of that until the point where you told my viewers to turn their telly off and that you will be banned. You will be banned now from ever coming back on. But no, it is good advice, actually. And in fact, I'm touching on this in the next hour about all of this fear and scaremongering that's going on at the moment, especially about the weather and stuff like that. I mean, I get it, there's a bit of climate change knocking about. But if you turned on your telly, and watched some other news outlets, you would seriously be forgiven for thinking that the world is literally about to end. But Nadia, thank you very much. Nadia Essex there.
You're listening to GB News Radio.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. Michelle Dewbs will say free market, free society, do what you want. Where are you on it?
Well, I think gambling's an evil. I mean, I have been known to have the occasional bet myself. I once won a substantial sum of money at Ascot from a tip from Frankie Dettori, which I've never got over, but I don't imagine it would ever happen again. And I do office sweepstakes and the occasional political bet, but I actually think that gambling is an evil and tempting people into it is disastrous and it ruins lives on a colossal scale. And we ought to go back to where we were in the 1950s. This is one of the occasions when I really do say we should go back to the 1950s, when it was largely banned, apart from on actual racecourses, because I think it does such immense harm. People can't handle it. And they destroy their lives and they destroy the lives of others because they do things like get themselves into incredible debt and have to sell the family home because of the disasters they cause.
So you would basically make it illegal?
Oh, I think it's I think it is a genuinely evil thing on its current scale, and I think there's no defence for it. The profits which it makes are shocking and unbearable to witness, and the dismal, disastrous effects it has on the individuals who get captivated by it are simply undeniable. Let's just not have it.
If you think that in the period you're talking about, gambling only took place on race courses.
No, I don't think that. Yeah. I know, I didn't, but it was still
very widespread.
Far less
the thing about it was it wasn't regulated in any way. It paid no tax, and it was often delivered by someone who'd break your legs if you didn't pay up. So there are attractions to having it within the legitimate system. I'm going to choose my words with care, actually, because when people may not know when they're watching, but we in the studio can't see what the adverts are when we go to a break. So I don't know if you had a gambling advert in the middle between the last segment and this one. But I would make the point that advertisements assist in subsidising, effectively, free-to-air broadcasting. They make it cheaper or they make it free. And that's a good, that's a social good, and it's a good that enables free speech on our part to an audience that hopefully wants to listen to us. And all manner of legal activity is there. I myself rather like a flutter. I accept Peter's position, but Peter's position, to my mind, means that you shouldn't bet rather than none of us should be able to.
Well, it obviously means that too. I just think by having it made much more difficult to do, particularly the way in which people can basically be clicking on an electronic device and tossing money they don't have down a bottomless pit, I think that is an outrage, and it really oughtn't to be allowed to happen.
So that's a different point about how modern technology has changed.
Well, it is a
industry.
different point, but it's nonetheless, it is the case. That is one of the reasons why the argument for preventing it entirely is very, very strong.
The gap there between what you think should be done and what could happen is really quite large, because, of course, in the United States until recently, they banned many forms of online betting whilst they were legal elsewhere, and effectively they just found it didn't work. The custom found its way to the supply. If the demand is there, it will find the supply.
I don't agree. I think if you take it seriously and if you really limit it with serious and carefully applied laws, you would save an awful lot of people from what is actually a tragedy. And it is a tragedy when it happens. You know the sort of cases I'm talking about, where people's spouses find that their husband or wife has run up such enormous debts through gambling that the family home has to be sold in secret. They don't know. This kind of thing should not be encouraged in any way. It's as dangerous in many ways as drugs, and I'm sick of it.
Well, let's put some numbers behind this, then, because apparently it's estimated that there are between 250,000 and 460,000 problem gamblers in Great Britain. Now, you know, that basically tells me that most people can gamble safely. It says here 0.5% of people in England have identified as problem gamblers. So why should people that actually, you know, quite like going to casinos or quite like, I don't know, betting on whatever, why should they have their enjoyment curtailed because a minority group struggle with it?
Because that's the price you have to pay for living in a civilised society. You sometimes have to give up pleasures which do you no harm, because they're the same pleasures.
That's an argument.
Say you asked me the question, which you have to give up pleasures which don't do you any harm, because those same pleasures do immense harm to others. It's just a simple bargain.
Where do you draw the line then? Would you ban alcohol? Because loads of people are
No,
alcoholic.
you can't ban alcohol, but I would definitely bring back the alcohol licensing laws which were abolished in the 1980s, which seemed to me to be extremely sensible. And it was a grave mistake to get rid of them. You couldn't ban alcohol, because even the Islamic Republic of Iran can't ban alcohol. You could certainly make it a lot harder.
The same sorts of figures that Michelle's talking about are the same sorts of level, I mean, approximately the same sorts of levels of people who claim that they can't control what they eat. They've got various problems about eating because they're too tempted by what the food industry has put in front of them, and they simply lack the will to control themselves. On your logic, we would be deprived of all sweet things and all savoury things because the small minority that can't control themselves need to have their needs dictate behaviour to the rest of us.
We haven't touched on food. We're talking about gambling.
I know, but
but then we're expanding it out, saying, well, where
you can expand it out.
It ruins the lives of a small minority of people, therefore none of us should be able to do it.
Well, it's not a small minority of people in the case of food, as it happens, and it would seem to me that some sort of limits on the levels of sugar in food, particularly in the sugary drinks which are given out with fast food, wouldn't be at all a bad thing because of the damage they do. But when someone says nanny state, I don't think, oh, that's a terrible thing. I think nannies, I'm sure Jacob Rees-Mogg would agree with me, I think nannies can be fantastic people and they do a lot of good. I think sometimes we have gone much too far in the direction of the nannyless state over the past 50 years.
The difference is that the nanny is somebody that the family asks to, the fact that the family, which is the right vehicle for raising a child, I assume you agree, the family thinks that nanny is a figure that they wish to play a part in it. The state being in loco parentis of all of us as free adults is quite different, and that's the misnomer.
Well, I'd love that not to be the case, but as I said in the discussion about child benefit, my case for the the reconstruction of and strengthening of the married family is one that has absolutely no chance of winning any support. So in the absence of that, how are we going to stop the misery caused by gambling on this scale?
And where does free will fit in your position on?
Well, people have it, but they don't. They're not encouraged or educated to exercise it.
And so, because we are too stupid to be allowed real freedom, and therefore the state needs to intervene.
It's not the stupid.
Or ignorant. Let's be fair to you. Ignorant.
No, those are not the words that I use. It's a simple Burkean point. If people won't restrain themselves, then the state has to step in to restrain them. I wish they would restrain themselves. I think we should be a much more restrained society. I would long as not just for the reconstruction of the married family, but for the reconstruction, the spreading again of the Protestant Christian religion, which used to dominate the way people behaved in this country. But these are far-fetched ideas.
If Peter had his...
regret to say...
Just make a basic utilitarian point, right? If Peter had his way and the industry was basically stamped out, one, it would go underground, and two, this study we've been referring to, I can't find the source, but I bet you it was paid for by the industry, which is at the moment being compelled to support gambling addiction. If you stamp it out, it doesn't disappear, it just goes underground.
Well, yeah, but going underground is often better. If something can only be marketed and sold by criminals, its operations are far more limited than if it can advertise every 3 seconds on television. That's the whole point of making things illegal. That's why we made cigarette advertising illegal. Because if you use the law against something which is bad, then it's effective.
Well,
and the fact that it goes underground is, all crime is caused by law.
Well, I can tell you, if it went underground, you'd lose £3.2 billion in tax take. That apparently...
Couldn't that just be why politicians don't do anything about this?
Well, yeah, that is what the gambling industry apparently paid in tax in 2021 and 2022 financial year. Lots of people here saying gambling is fine. It's the adverts that you're saying should be banned. I just completely disagree. I think each to their own, and if you've got a problem, as some of you might do, there are so many places now that you can go out and reach out to try and get some free help, and there's no shame in asking for help. I want to move on and talk about religious beliefs. Do you think that they are compatible with serving in public office, particularly when it comes to politics? Yes or no?
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Today's showers ease overnight, clear and cool conditions for many, but more rain in places by dawn. That rain arriving from the west, a small frontal system, a slack area of low pressure. Ahead of it, actually a ridge of high pressure helping to kill off Monday's showers in many places. Clear spells widely across England, Wales and Scotland overnight. Just a few showers continuing for the north of Scotland. A different story for Northern Ireland, as well as eventually parts of Wales and towards the southwest. Here, clouds thicken, 12 or 13 Celsius by dawn, but towards the north and the east, shelter spots getting off to a cool start, 8-9 Celsius in one or two places, as well as plenty of sunshine. We'll keep the sunny skies for northern Scotland, as well as the south and southeast of England during the morning. In between, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain, that rain pushing north into central Scotland, affecting much of northern England, Wales and eventually the far southwest. The rain most persistent across parts of Northern Ireland, and under the wet weather, it's going to feel on the cool side. Now, all of that pulls away during Wednesday morning. We keep a cloudy swathe, I think, through northern England into the Midlands, parts of Wales and East Anglia. Showery rain through much of the day here. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and showers, driest towards the southwest, but we'll keep the showery conditions on Thursday and Friday. And all the while, it is going to turn a bit cooler.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Peter Hitchens, Alex Dean still alongside me now. A Christian counsellor tweeted the following: Pride, as in, gay pride celebration, it's not a virtue, but a sin. Well, anyway, he has been suspended from the Conservative Party as a result. He's also gone on to say, the councillor this is, he reckons he's been, I quote, cancelled by 6 other organisations after expressing his religious beliefs on social media. What do you think to this? Because, that's his view. He would say that it represents his religion. Is there a place in politics for that kind of view?
Well, let's take the free speech point first. He, of course, hasn't been suspended as a councillor. He's had his membership of a party, to which, to be clear, I belong, suspended. The difference is quite important, because it's not as if he hasn't been suspended from being a democratically elected person. Yeah. And indeed, you will notice that in the list of 17 candidates in the Uxbridge by-election that Patrick was forced to read out in the show before, because if you mention some, you have to read the lot. There was a Christian People's Alliance candidate in that. And of course, people can run explicitly and overtly on the basis of their Christian belief and seek to be elected in that capacity. So that's my first point about free speech, which exists in this country, and you can say, broadly speaking, as you wish, although it's not as well defended as I might like. The second point is this: he didn't just say pride isn't a virtue, it's a sin, which might be thought to be a coy, as pride is one of the sins listed in the Bible and so forth. He did go on to say some other things. They're making it clear that it was about Pride Month and gay rights, effectively. So using the hashtags for Pride Month and so forth. So I think that was probably his mistake.
I want to come back to you on your first point, but before I do, Peter, where do you stand on this?
Well, if Alex says there's free speech in this country, I don't agree. It's quite plain there are some things which are now pretty much unsayable, and it sounds as if this guy has said some of them. It's also not true to say that he could stand, or somebody with those views could stand for the Christian People's Alliance. I don't know what their attitude is towards it anyway, but the point about the Conservative Party, so-called, and the Labour Party as well, is that these are the two tribal parties which control the access to almost all the electoral system in this country. They win most of the parliamentary seats, they win most of the council seats, their electoral machines, and the tribal habits of voters mean that if you don't get selected by them, your chances of being elected to any post are pretty slender.
But Peter, you are eloquent and you are thoughtful. Your views on the two main parties are very clear. Why don't you start your own and convince people that they're wrong?
Well, anybody can start a political party, but saying this is a political party is absurd unless the party can overcome the huge barriers to becoming a major party. It bears as much relation to the Labour Party and the Conservative Party as a toy train set does to the French railways. I won't say British railways because they're a sort of toy system anyway. But certainly, you can't just declare that you're in politics. The political parties are supported by state funding. They're supported by dodgy billionaires. They're supported by broadcasting rules which give them large amounts of time on the basis of their previous performance and exclude others. And they also, as I say, have the benefit of decades of tribal habit among voters who, will, especially at general elections, will return to them. So they are the gatekeepers of British politics, and what they decide can or cannot be said is what happens.
Let me link you, because we're literally almost out of time. I want to link directly to what he said as a quote. It is now almost impossible to say something biblically truthful on sexual ethics in UK society without being cancelled or having your life ruined. So when it comes to the Tory pack, because yes, you're quite rightly pointing out he's still a councillor, but not now as part of the Conservative Party. So is he true then? Can he not state his biblical sexual ethics truth and still remain within the Conservative Party?
I'm sure you can. I certainly have no brief to speak for the party, but I would say this, that I didn't mean to besmirch the Christian People's Alliance either. They may or may not want this sort of person as a candidate. I was making the point that you can have overt religious beliefs and stand for election in this country.
John says keep religious views and religion, all of it, out of politics.
Including anti-religion?
Well, Jane says, I think we should have more religion. We might get some morals rather than the bunch, she says, that we have now. Look at it, the time does fly. But you're divided on that one, I have to say. Gloria, she says, politics and religion, those two things are the things that cause more arguments than anything, even money, she says. Lewis says, there's always been a saying in the pub, never talk about religion, never talk about politics, and people should heed that advice.
We're not in the pub, though.
No, this is very true. I wish I was, quite frankly. But no, we are not. We're in your living rooms right now having this conversation. But look, this is all I've now got time for. Peter, Alex, thank you for your company.
Thank you.
I'm off for the rest of this week, so have a good few days, and I will see you again next week.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Today's showers ease overnight, clear and cool conditions for many, but more rain in places by dawn. That rain arriving from the west, a small frontal system, a slack area of low pressure. Ahead of it, actually a ridge of high pressure helping to kill off Monday's showers in many places. Clear spells widely across England, Wales and Scotland overnight, just a few showers continuing for the north of Scotland. A different story for Northern Ireland, as well as eventually parts of Wales and towards the southwest. Here, clouds thicken, 12 or 13 Celsius by dawn, but towards the north and the east, shelter spots getting off to a cool start, 8-9 Celsius in one or two places, as well as plenty of sunshine. We keep the sunny skies for northern Scotland, as well as the south and southeast of England during the morning. In between, a lot of cloud, outbreaks of rain, that rain pushing north into central Scotland, affecting much of northern England, Wales and eventually the far southwest. The rain most persistent across parts of Northern Ireland, and under the wet weather, it's going to feel on the cool side. Now, all of that pulls away during Wednesday morning. We keep a cloudy swathe, I think, through northern England into the Midlands, parts of Wales and East Anglia. Showery rain through much of the day here. Elsewhere, a mixture of sunny spells and showers, driest towards the southwest, but we keep the showery conditions on Thursday and Friday. And all the while, it is going to turn a bit cooler.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well,
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into